Hey guys, tonight we dive into the silky, wine-drenched, faintly sandalwood-scented underbelly of ancient Rome through the weary eyes of someone who definitely didn't sign up for this much body oil. You are a Roman orgy planner. Yes, that's a real job. And yes, you probably won't survive this day without some damage. Spiritual, emotional, or at the very least, olfactory. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'd love to know, where are you listening from? And what time is it right now? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The moment you open your eyes, you're assaulted by two things: the scent of stale lavender from the pillow-stuffed wall hangings, and the urgent screech of a messenger boy outside your chamber door. You squint against the amber sunlight pooling through the slatted wooden shutters. The air is already warm, unforgiving, like the patron who's bankrolling tonight's soiree of sinful splendor. Your back aches from sleeping on a too-soft mattress, stuffed with goose feathers, which sounded luxurious until your spine started filing complaints. You groan, roll over, and knock over a stack of scrolls labeled Guest List, Tier 3 Nobility Plus Unpredictable Gods. You'll have to deal with that later. Outside your chamber, your assistant, a curly-haired Greek scribe named Thalos, is reading off a list at terrifying speed. Something about new amphorae of honeyed wine, a missing peacock, and a lute player who can't stop crying. It's barely sunrise. You trudge to the wash basin, splash cold water on your face. You reach for the cosmetic paste, made, unfortunately, from crocodile dung and white lead. Roman beauty standards are unrelenting, even for behind-the-scenes staff like you. The paste smells like wet bricks and regret. Still, it's believed to improve complexion, and besides, today is all about appearances. You throw on a linen tunic that's been lightly perfumed with rose oil, standard attire for someone who needs to impress, intimidate, and occasionally disappear into a shadowy corner. The day begins with the sacred Roman trifecta: gossip, grooming, and groaning. You pass by a communal bathhouse where senators soak and complain loudly about grain prices and their wives. You don't have time to bathe. You've got a schedule tighter than a senator's toga sash, but you slow just long enough to hear one of them joke about last week's orgy being a little too Greek, whatever that means. On your way through the forum, you dodge a street philosopher screaming about virtue and a pair of twins juggling flaming sticks. One of them hurls a fig at your head. Welcome to Rome. Your first stop is the Temple of Venus Genetrix, not for piety. No, you've been summoned by your patron's cousin, a high-ranking priestess with strong opinions on which gods should bless tonight's events. She offers you a fig, ironically not the one that hit you earlier, and informs you that the statue of Priapus must be placed at the eastern threshold of the villa, facing west. You nod, trying to remember which end of the villa is east and whether Priapus is the one with the, well, yes, that one. As you make your way to the villa itself, you reflect on your station in Roman society. You're technically a freedman. Your family were slaves, but you earned freedom through excellent party management. Not noble, but not nobody. Somewhere in between. The sweet spot, where people trust you enough to hand you a chest of gold coins, but not enough to let you recline at the table. The villa is nestled on the Aventine Hill, overlooking the Tiber like it's judging you. When you arrive, Two laborers are already arguing over where to hang the velvet drapes. One insists they should be crimson, the other says gold to match the vomitorium tiles. You sigh. This again. Inside, a marble bust of Marcus Aurelius has been shoved into a closet because he looks too disappointed. You make a mental note to replace it with something less judgmental. Maybe a bust of Nero. At least he'd understand. You walk past the triclinium, the grand dining room where later tonight people will be lounging, whispering, pretending not to notice who's feeding grapes to whom. For now, it's just echoing footsteps and your checklist. Tonight's guest list includes several senators, a famous playwright, two retired gladiators, a merchant with suspiciously well-fed leopards, and a flute prodigy who might be 12. Historians still argue whether this blend of guests was standard or an extreme outlier, but you're used to it. Everyone wants in on a good scandal. You check the courtyard. A single fountain burbles with questionable enthusiasm. There's a naked statue of a nymph holding a jug. Someone's drawn a crude mustache on her with charcoal. You roll your eyes, grab a sponge, and scrub. Then comes the first minor crisis. The lead caterer has vanished. His apprentice, red-faced and trembling, says he ran off after someone insulted his oysters. You console him with a bronze coin and a sympathetic pat on the shoulder. Just then, a runner arrives, panting, dusty, wild-eyed. He thrusts a sealed scroll into your hand. You open it. It's from your patron's wife. She's concerned that last time there were too many orgy cushions and not enough restraint. You nod thoughtfully, wondering what counts as restraint in this context. As the sun rises higher, your to-do list stretches like the toga of a drunk patrician. Every moment is a balance of diplomacy, deception, and dramatic size. And yet, beneath the stress, there's a weird kind of joy, a rhythm. You've done this before. You'll do it again, probably tomorrow. You march away from the villa and back into the chaos of the forum, the ancient Roman equivalent of a farmer's market, a food court, a political stage, and a chaotic high school reunion all rolled into one. Your goal is deceptively simple: breakfast and basic supplies. But nothing in Rome ever stays basic for long. The moment you step into the plaza, you're nearly run over by a chariot stacked with amphorae of date wine, its driver shouting something about urgent delivery to House Flavius. You hop back just in time to avoid being flattened. The streets are already teeming with vendors hawking honey cakes, fish sauce, and perfumes that smell suspiciously like goat. You breathe it in anyway. It's oddly comforting. That heady mix of fresh bread, donkey sweat, and overripe figs. That's the perfume of your people. Your stomach growls, reminding you that your last meal was a questionable oyster around midnight, flung at you in a dramatic gesture of creative disagreement by a poet. You grab a warm libum, a kind of Roman cheesecake wrapped in fig leaves, from a stall run by an old woman who charges you double, recognizing your tunic from last week's infamous party. You don't argue. She throws in a handful of raisins and a wink, so you consider it a win. As you munch, you cross paths with two senators deep in conversation. More like performance art, really. They're loudly debating the merits of retiring to Capri versus sticking it out in Rome for civic duty. You know full well that civic duty is code for theater seats and extramarital opportunities. Still, they nod gravely when you walk by, pretending they don't know who you are, but they definitely do. One of them was carried out of your last event, wrapped in a tapestry, and claiming to be Mars, god of war. You stop by a small stall that specializes in scented oils. The vendor, an exiled Parthian with too many earrings, offers you something called Summer of Neptune, a potent blend of lavender, fish brine, and powdered pearl. You pretend to consider it while actually scanning the list Thalos scribbled on a wax tablet earlier. 2 amphorae rosewater, 1 crate myrrh candles, 6 units of powdered saffron, 1 discreetly labeled jar of snail essence. You ask the vendor for the rosewater, and he insists you try a new blend infused with dolphin breath. You decline. He's joking, you think? Probably. At the next stall, you find the saffron, bright yellow, eye-wateringly expensive, and weighed with the delicacy of gold dust. As the vendor measures it out, you glance over and spot a duel beginning in the distance. It seems someone insulted someone else's choice of toga fastener. You casually adjust your own fibula brooch, just in case. With supplies in hand, you detour to a quieter corner of the forum, where performers are rehearsing for tonight's entertainment. A trio of acrobats stack themselves into a human pyramid, while a lute player gently weeps over a broken string. Nearby, an actor in full satyr costume argues with a stagehand over whether he should bleat more seductively. You make a mental note. Remind Thalos. No more interpretive goat dances. A loud clink draws your attention. A wealthy matron is showing off her new necklace. 3 rows of emeralds the size of olives. She's surrounded by younger women, nodding in forced admiration, and older men pretending not to be impressed. You recognize her. She's on tonight's guest list and was very specific in her request for a reclining couch with maximum velvet. You briefly consider swapping her seat with someone less politically useful. You won't, but imagining it is its own reward. Then, just as you're about to leave, a local street preacher locks eyes with you and points dramatically. He shouts, "You, the planner of lustful feasts, repent." You smile politely and wave. This is not your first theological scolding. He starts into a long rant about the fall of Carthage and moral decay. You nod along, chewing your raisin and ignoring him. Historians still argue whether these preachers had any real political influence or if they were just the ancient version of podcast conspiracy theorists. You finally slip away and duck into the nearby Thermopolium, a Roman fast food spot, for a quick cup of watered wine. Inside, a few workers on break are chatting about the latest spectacle in the Colosseum. Something about a bear trained to juggle amphorae before being eaten by lions. You sigh. You're not in the spectacle business. Your events are subtler, more velvet, less carnage, ideally. Outside, the sun is higher now, glaring off the marble temples and bouncing off polished bronze shields carried by decorative guards. Your tunic sticks uncomfortably to your back, and the rose oil from earlier is starting to smell like wilted funeral arrangements. You head toward your next stop, the domus of a minor priest who claims to channel Mercury. He's agreed to bless the entrance of the villa in exchange for a bottle of Iberian wine and a personalized invitation scroll written in purple ink. You're skeptical, but the host is into omens lately, so you play along. The priest greets you with breath that could strip paint and a handshake sticky with honey. His home is filled with bird cages and whispering incense smoke. He draws symbols on a wax tablet, mutters something about favorable breezes, and hands you a tiny pouch of feathers, which he insists must be buried under the third fountain from the left. You don't even blink. You've done weirder. Back on the street, a group of schoolboys run past you, laughing and throwing figs. One hits your sandal. You look down at the squashed mess and sigh. It's going to be that kind of day. You pause briefly at the base of the Capitoline Hill, watching a group of politicians exit the Senate building, their expressions ranging from smug to more smug. They're too distracted to notice you. But you notice them. 3 of them are on tonight's list, and at least one is probably bringing a mistress disguised as his aunt. Your stomach rumbles again, but there's no time. You roll your shoulders, take a deep breath of hot, fig-scented air, and head back toward the villa. The real madness is just beginning. By the time you return to the villa, your arms are loaded with parcels, scrolls, and a bundle of hand-dyed cushions that you suspect are stuffed with goose feathers and broken dreams. Thalos rushes to meet you at the entrance, eyes wide with a mix of admiration and barely concealed panic. "Good news," he whispers, the way people say good news before immediately delivering a crisis. The Egyptian envoy accepted the invitation and brought a leopard. You blink. A live one? Very. The leopard is currently lounging in the atrium, eyeing the mosaic floor like it's contemplating home renovations. Its handler, a man draped in gold chains and sunburn, is casually feeding it strips of salted meat. You silently reassign the guest list in your head. Leopard equals priority seating, preferably near someone who's offended you. Thalos tries to hand you another scroll. Also, the poet Ennius arrived early and has locked himself in the peristyle. He says he's fasting for artistic reasons and won't leave until the spirit of Dionysus whispers a verse into his ear. He also drank all the pomegranate wine. You nod. This is normal. Ennius once performed an entire ode while standing in a fish pond, wrapped in eel nets. Tonight will be no different. You shuffle into the villa's side room, your operations hub. Wax tablets litter every surface, alongside scribbled diagrams of table arrangements, wine flow charts, and a mood board featuring silks, fig branches, and a rather unfortunate sketch of an orgy tent. You sit heavily, adjusting the cushions beneath you. They squeak. You hope it's the cushions. The staff bustles around like ants in togas. One is sorting rose petals into floatable and non-floatable categories. Another is hanging garlands above the vomitorium with a level of care usually reserved for temple offerings. Someone else runs by holding an entire cooked boar, muttering about spice rubs and pomegranate seeds. Your role now is triage. First up, the seating chart. This is the battlefield of every Roman gathering. You begin the delicate dance, balancing influence, rivalry, and sheer vanity. The senator from earlier can't sit next to the general's wife again. Last time, they ended up in a philosophical shouting match about stoic love. The Egyptian envoy must have a central seat, both to show respect and to ensure the leopard's handler can reach him quickly. And the matron with the emeralds? You place her near the harpist. If nothing else, the music might distract her from noticing that her maximum velvet couch is actually dyed linen. Outside, a minor earthquake of drama rumbles in. The caterer has arrived. He's loud, flamboyant, and very proud of his new dish. Oysters stuffed with honey-glazed mice, topped with edible gold flakes. You nod approvingly while suppressing a gag. "Art," he says, gesturing to the trays. "History will remember this." Historians still argue whether this chef invented the edible gold craze or simply had a grudge against diners with functioning taste buds. As he disappears back to the kitchens, a small boy appears with a note. It's sealed with wax and smells faintly of sandalwood. You pop it open. a last-minute cancellation. The wealthy merchant from Hispania has been detained by customs over unauthorized spice importation. You sigh. That's your cumin supplier out of commission. No matter. You adjust the guest list and replace him with a freedwoman known for her exotic bird collection and cutting wit. She once insulted an emperor's sandals so thoroughly that he offered her a job in satire. She'll do nicely. As you scan the updated list, Thalos returns with a look that says, "Brace yourself. Remember the lute player from last time?" You pause. The one who only knows 2 songs, both about fish? He nods. He's back, and he brought his brother. They're a duo now. He calls it aquatic harmony. You make a mental note to place them somewhere far, far from the main party. Perhaps inside a closet, or on the roof. The light from the courtyard begins to change. It's past midday, and the sun is slanting through the open atrium, bathing the mosaic floors in a golden haze. You can hear birds calling from the fig trees and the occasional hiss of someone accidentally touching a too-hot bronze fixture. You rise and begin your inspection rounds. The dining couches have been arranged in a careful semicircle, with plump cushions, perfumed draperies, and low tables stacked with tasting dishes. Each cushion has been spritzed with rosewater and, thanks to your instruction, sprinkled with lavender petals instead of powdered snail essence. A small but critical win. Near the entrance, the greeters are rehearsing the evening's welcome lines, repeating phrases like, "Salve, most radiant guest," and "May Bacchus smile upon your digestion." You quietly correct a pronunciation and resist the urge to add, "Please don't bring any more exotic animals." In the garden, performers are setting up for their shadow play. You've sourced a group of Syrian puppeteers who specialize in recreating mythological scenes using firelight and silk screens. One of them gives you a wink. You're not entirely sure he understands Latin, but he's got charisma. The wine steward catches your eye and signals the delivery of the evening's vintage, amphorae of Falernian, sealed and marked with a date so old you suspect it may have fermented into vinegar. You sample a sip. It tastes like sunburn and smugness. Perfect. The bath attendants are last. They're busy prepping the balneum, where guests can freshen up before reclining. Scented oils line the walls, and the steam is already rising in curls from the heated pool. You remind them, no more helpful scrubbing unless specifically requested. Last time, someone lost a ring and accused the staff of treason. Finally, you return to your control room and take a breath. The day's prep has been less chaotic than usual, though that's not saying much. You consult your schedule one last time. In 2 hours, the doors open. The orchestra will play. Guests will flow in like wine into goblets. And you'll be in the eye of the storm, armed with a wax tablet, a crooked smile, and a leopard contingency plan. 2 hours until showtime. You stand in the doorway of the villa like a general surveying the field before battle, except instead of spears and siege engines, you've got garlands and garum. The last of the lighting is being adjusted. Oil lamps suspended from bronze chains, polished to a glow, their flames flickering like nervous dancers. You double-check that the rose-scented smoke is wafting in the right direction, not directly into the seating cushions like last time, when several guests developed itchy eyes and accused you of plotting their blinding. Outside, a small line is beginning to form. People never arrive on time in Rome, unless you're throwing an event this lavish. Then they arrive early, pretend it was an accident, and insist they just happened to be in the neighborhood wearing 3 layers of imported silk and a headdress shaped like a swan. The first arrival is a young patrician couple. He's sporting a toga so white it looks aggressive. She's decked in pearls, a veil, and an expression of vague disdain. You greet them with warmth, offer a glass of cooled Molsum, and politely ignore their complaints about the heat, the smell of lilies, and the placement of the leopard. Yes, it's still lounging in the atrium. The handler assures you it's very calm, though the way it licks its lips every time someone walks by is less than reassuring. Guests start to trickle in. Each entrance becomes a minor performance. A centurion, with biceps the size of amphorae, nods curtly and requests a seat near the kitchen. To keep an eye on the fire risk, he says. More likely, he just wants to be first to the oysters. A philosopher floats in next, mumbling something about stoic detachment, while eyeing the harpist like he might marry her by dessert. The freed woman you invited shows up in spectacular fashion, escorted by a servant carrying a talking parrot that immediately squawks, "Nice sandals," to the woman behind her. Everyone laughs. She beams. The bird is already more popular than Ennius the poet, who is now wandering the garden barefoot, asking fig trees if they believe in fate. The shadow puppeteers take their place behind the silk screen, fiddling with lamps and cutouts of gods and monsters. You slide them a dish of honeyed dates. Artists are always more manageable when fed. The music begins. First, soft lyre and flute, just enough to blend with the low buzz of conversation. You move among the guests, like a shark in scented oil, noting who's talking to whom. Which cushions have been fluffed too enthusiastically, and how many people have started drinking without waiting for the first toast. The senator from earlier finds you. He's already halfway through his second cup and waxing poetic about the glory of the Republic. You nod along while discreetly signaling Thalos to swap his wine with watered-down pomegranate juice. He won't notice. Most politicians don't. You pass by the cooks, who are assembling a tray of dormice, each delicately stuffed with pine nuts and herbs. You remind them, again, not to garnish with anything that might still be twitching. Presentation matters. One of the musicians accidentally hits a dissonant chord, and the harpist glares at him like he just insulted her grandmother. You glide over and smooth things out with a few well-placed compliments and a promise of extra figs. Her smile returns. Crisis averted. And then it happens. A trumpet blast from the entrance. All heads turn. In strides a man draped in Tyrian purple, the kind of purple reserved for people who own more property than some provinces. He's flanked by 2 servants and trailed by a cloud of myrrh. You recognize him instantly. A high-ranking magistrate known for his appetite for drama, wine, and marrying people for sport. You hadn't expected him. He raises a hand. "I heard there would be oysters." You bow slightly, offer your most serene smile, and reply, "And poetry, and music, and perhaps a leopard, if you behave." He laughs, slaps you on the back, and proceeds directly to the table with the honey-glazed mice. You feel your stomach knot. His presence shifts the social hierarchy of the whole evening. Guests will orbit him like moths to a particularly fragrant flame. You'll need to adjust conversations, seating, and musical cues accordingly. But it's fine. You've trained for this. This is what orgy planners do. The sun begins to dip, and the golden light fades into a soft orange. Servants move to light more oil lamps, and the garden fills with flickering shadows and the sound of rustling silks. The harpist begins a new piece, a delicate melody that almost masks the distant cough of someone inhaling too much incense. You take a deep breath. This is the golden hour, when everyone is buzzed enough to be charming, but not yet drunk enough to start debating metaphysics or wrestling in the fountains. You pace the perimeter like a watchful priest, adjusting the angle of cushions, whispering instructions to staff, and occasionally dodging the parrot, who has now learned to say, "Not again," with unsettling accuracy. You pass by a knot of guests discussing the wine. Someone claims it's from the private cellar of a long-dead emperor. Someone else insists it's actually mixed with seawater to improve the bite. Historians still argue whether Roman wines were genuinely delightful or simply endured out of civic pride and stubbornness. A laugh erupts from the corner, where Ennius is now reading verse aloud, dramatically gesturing with an olive branch. You decide not to intervene. Yet, if he starts crying, you'll fetch the fig cookies. You return briefly to the operations room and check your wax tablet. So far, only one unexpected guest, 0 injuries, and the leopard is still horizontal. That's a good start. Then Thalos appears with a strange look. "Problem in the triclinium," he says. You follow him quickly to the dining area. There, you find 2 guests engaged in a heated discussion about the morality of gladiatorial games. One insists they are cultural expressions of Roman valor. The other counters that they're barbaric and prefers theatrical performances. The argument is escalating. You step between them, offer both a cup of watered wine, and shift the conversation, gently, toward the topic of how uncomfortable Greek sandals are. It works. Just barely. You head back toward the atrium as laughter rises again behind you. The light has fully dimmed now, and a servant is fanning a bowl of citrus peels over hot coals, letting the sweet smoke drift upward. Someone sneezes. Someone else claps. The leopard yawns. And you? You're still standing, which, given the stakes, is impressive. The sun has fully set now, and the villa takes on a different life, one that shimmers in golden lamplight and smells like cinnamon, roasted meats, and slightly too much myrrh. The guests have settled in their dining positions, lounging on their left sides across thick, embroidered cushions. It's a posture that looks leisurely, but was clearly invented by someone who hated vertebrae. You glide through the room one more time, double-checking placements, wine jugs at arm's reach, dishes of olives, and dates arranged just so, and the famed peacock. Yes, that peacock, roasted whole and reassembled with its feathers intact, tail fanned behind it like a smug, edible god. The evening's entertainment begins in earnest. A slender man with a voice like crushed velvet rises to deliver a short poem. It's about love. Or maybe it's about tax farming. Hard to tell with these metaphors. Everyone nods along thoughtfully, even the parrot, who's now repeating, very deep, at a perfect volume to earn approving chuckles. You breathe. This is the sweet spot. The food is hot, the wine is flowing, and people have stopped asking when the real orgy starts. That question always comes up. And no, you will not answer it. Not now. Not ever. Because what even is an orgy, really? For some, it's a feast with extra kissing. For others, it's an excuse to wear less clothing and shout philosophy. You plan the party, not the aftermath. A servant sidles up. The oysters are gone. Gone? You repeat, whispering but sharp. We had amphorae full. Yes, he says, all eaten, or stolen, or both. You sigh. Of course. There's always one guest who believes all you can eat means eat everything so others can't. You dispatch another runner to the kitchen to bring out the backup dish, boiled sow's womb with leeks and herbs. It's not quite the same as oysters, but it has a certain chewy prestige. Across the room, two guests are deep in debate about the nature of Jupiter's wrath. One insists the gods are metaphors for human flaws. The other counters they're real and occasionally crash parties in disguise. Historians still argue whether the average Roman actually believed in their pantheon, or whether they simply hedged their bets with enough sacrifices to keep everyone vaguely happy. You don't have time to philosophize. You're too busy watching for the next disaster. And here it comes. The leopard is no longer horizontal. It's now sitting up, ears perked, eyes fixed on the platter of honey-glazed locusts on the low table nearest to it. Guests are politely trying not to notice. One man is actively sweating. You sidle up to the handler, who is drinking something suspiciously strong-smelling from a metal flask. He winks. She's just curious. She's a predator, you reply under your breath, and that man over there is wearing a tunic made of gazelle. The handler burps, nods, and tosses the leopard a strip of jerky. It snarfs it down, yawns again, and resumes its statue impression. Crisis averted. For now. You turn back to the guests. Someone has started singing. It's not clear whether they were invited to. It's also not clear what language it is. You gently slide in and applaud before the chorus can begin, then steer them toward the fountain, where the acoustics are more forgiving, and where you can strategically turn up the music from the lyre ensemble to drown them out. The shadow puppeteers are up next. They've created a grand tale about the founding of Rome, complete with Romulus, Remus, a very dramatic she-wolf, and some surprisingly inventive use of firelight. The guests love it. Someone claps. The parrot repeats, "Found the wolf!" And it somehow becomes the catchphrase of the evening. You check in with the cooks again. The third course, flamingo tongues in garum reduction, is nearly ready. You remind them, again, no visible feathers. Last time, one got stuck in a senator's throat, and you had to pretend it was a ritual omen. As you return to the dining area, the mood has changed again. It's dreamier now. Wine makes everything softer. The cushions have accepted their guests into their folds. People are murmuring more than speaking, except for one man near the brazier who is loudly insisting that Julius Caesar invented time. That's not, a nearby woman begins. He reformed the calendar, he yells triumphantly. That's basically inventing time. You decide not to get involved. Some arguments, like certain cheeses, are better left to ferment on their own. At this point, the scent of incense is a fog. You step outside to breathe. The stars are out now, crisp and silent, and the garden is aglow with little firefly lanterns. You hear laughter, deep, rich, slightly slurred, and know that dessert must be going well. Figs, dates, honey cakes shaped like fish, and a curious gelatinous creation made of boiled cow bones and flavored with rosewater. It wobbles beautifully and tastes like regret. You stroll the outer garden path, nodding to guards, calming your nerves. A small group is gathered around a poet who's reciting a love elegy to a cat. The cat is not present. You wish you weren't, but you nod approvingly anyway. You pass the fountain and pause. The man who insisted Caesar invented time is now asleep in the shrubbery. He is snoring. The parrot is mimicking the snore perfectly, and two guests are applauding. You begin to laugh quietly to yourself. It's absurd, all of it. The planning, the disasters, the drama. But somehow, it's working. The guests are fed, entertained, and enchanted. You even spot the magistrate leaning back with a serene expression, petting the leopard's tail like it's a lapdog. You hear a servant whisper, "More wine for table 3," and nod for it to be delivered. You check your wax tablet one more time. Everything that could have gone wrong mostly didn't, except the oysters, and the leopard, and possibly the poem about the cat. Still, it's a success. And you haven't sat down in hours, but you don't mind. Because this is the moment every planner dreams of. The high tide of the evening, when everything glows, and even the gods might pause to peer in from Olympus. You take one last walk through the atrium, straighten a cushion, nod at a philosopher, and slip away, unnoticed, like a whisper. It's well past midnight now, though time here flows like spiced wine, slow, warm, and a little distorted. The torches flicker lower, their oil nearly spent, and a soft hush falls over the gathering. Not because people are leaving, heavens no, but because the mood has shifted once again, from lavish indulgence to the quiet, secretive hours when reputations are either sealed or shattered. You duck behind a silk curtain and into what the villa owner calls the cubicula relaxata, or relaxation rooms. You call it the rooms where things get weird. You've prepped these spaces yourself. Couches covered in imported Egyptian linen, bowls of fruit strategically placed, enough rose petals to make even Venus roll her eyes, and incense thick enough to obscure minor sins. This is where the after-party lives. Guests begin to drift in, some in pairs, others in groups, and a few who don't seem entirely sure how they got there. You offer drinks, mulsum, wine sweetened with honey, and light entertainment, including a lyre player whose melodies are so soothing they might qualify as sedatives. The parrot, by the way, has been gently relocated to the kitchen. He was starting to recite a list of ex-wives, and one of them is present. From here, your job becomes less about orchestration and more about subtle damage control. You whisper to one guest that no, the mosaic of Bacchus on the floor is not an invitation to dance on it barefoot with oil. You gently redirect another away from the host's private study, where last time someone accidentally read aloud a will that hadn't been written yet. You hand a spare toga to a man who forgot his somewhere near the atrium statue of Mercury and is now feeling liberated. The poet with the cat obsession has returned. This time, he's claiming his verses are being dictated by the stars. You nod and hand him a wax tablet. Let the muses speak. Somewhere in the distance, a flute begins to play, a lonely, haunting tune. You follow the sound to find a small trio of musicians nestled in a corner niche, improvising a song that seems to wrap the walls in velvet. It's beautiful. You allow yourself a moment to listen. Then someone shrieks. You whirl around and rush to the source, one of the private side rooms. A woman bursts out, laughing uncontrollably, followed by a man wrapped in what appears to be an entire tapestry. "It's fine," she gasps between giggles. "He thought the sculpture was real." You peek inside. Sure enough, the statue of Apollo has been kissed thoroughly, and now has a wreath of laurel askew on its marble head. You sigh and adjust it. Apollo, bless him, never looks surprised. You return to the garden to find two senators locked in a slow, confusing embrace. They are arguing about Stoicism versus Epicureanism, while also apparently trying to play a game of knucklebones. You consider intervening, but they're both smiling too much to worry. Historians still argue whether Roman elites took their philosophical identities seriously, or whether it was mostly just a fashion trend with fancy terminology. In a far alcove, A group is gathered around a traveling mystic who reads omens in wine stains. She peers into a silver cup and declares, "Someone here is doomed to fall in love with a gladiator." Gasps, laughter, and one visible blush follow. The mystic winks at you as you pass. She's not on the roster. Where did she even come from? Back near the fountain, someone is performing a balancing act on a narrow ledge, cheered on by a crowd. You step closer and realize it's the same man who passed out in the shrubbery earlier. Apparently, revived by fame and fermented grapes, he is now reciting lines from Virgil while balancing a clay cup on his head. You make a note. Hire him for next time. Unintentional entertainment always hits hardest. The kitchen staff emerges with a late offering. Figs stuffed with almonds, drizzled with honey and sea salt. You accept one yourself. You've earned it. The flavors burst sweet and earthy, and for a brief moment, you feel what the guests must feel. Spoiled, adored, slightly dazed. As the night deepens, your job evolves into a kind of invisible choreography. You steer tipsy guests away from breakables. You whisper reminders to the musicians to keep things slow and mellow. You help someone find a sandal that somehow ended up in a fruit bowl. Even the leopard has grown weary of spectacle and is curled up next to a heater in the back courtyard, tail flicking gently in sleep. You resist the urge to pet it. Barely. Then there's a quiet pause. Just a moment where everything stands still. No flutes, no talking. Just the soft rustle of fabric and a gentle breeze wafting through the open colonnades. It's here, in this deep silence, that the evening earns its mystique. The Romans called these the horae furtae, the stolen hours. Time borrowed from dawn. Time when people whisper secrets they'll pretend never happened. And when the planner, you, finally breathes a little easier. Someone asks you to join a game of riddles. You politely decline. Someone else offers you a drink. You accept. You find a seat near the peristyle and watch the lamplight ripple across the polished marble floor. From here, you can see it all. The drifting guests, the flickering torches, the empty amphorae. A senator snoring under a fig tree. A servant quietly folding a discarded cloak. A pair of lovers swaying gently to music only they can hear. And over it all, a peaceful exhaustion. Not the kind that crushes you, but the kind that tells you something has gone just right. You rest your head back against the wall and smile. This wasn't chaos. This was art. And you're the brush. The first hint of sunrise creeps across the marble tiles, a pale smear of lavender light spilling in through the high windows. Most of the guests have either slipped away into the pre-dawn hush or are asleep where they fell. Some curled like cats on divans, others using togas as makeshift blankets. And you're still awake, still walking, still quietly making sure that no part of the night collapses too loudly. You're also starting to get that peculiar second wind. You know the one. It arrives when exhaustion has passed its limit, and you're somehow awake again, floating through the last tasks like a ghost with a clipboard. And, oh, the cleanup. Let's start there. You retrieve the staff, your loyal, bleary-eyed cohort of servers, musicians, and emergency toga stitchers. The kitchen boys are scraping what's left of the stuffed dormice into compost bins, and the harpist is fast asleep, curled around her instrument. You let her sleep. The melody she played during that one wine-soaked monologue about moonlight and destiny actually made 3 guests cry. That's more than the last tragic playwright managed. You pass the atrium. There's a pile of fruit arranged into a suspiciously phallic sculpture, and one of the busts is wearing a guest sandal like a party hat. You adjust it with a smirk. Some things are best left unexplained. You direct your team, sweep petals, relight torches, gather discarded jewelry, of which there is somehow a lot. You pull aside the curtain to one cubicula and discover a senator sleeping beside an amphora, his hand still inside a bowl of grapes. You close it gently again. That's tomorrow's problem. Outside, the garden smells like wine, roses, and something that might be goat. But you're choosing not to investigate that one. The peacocks are back, clucking indignantly at the damage to their preferred stomping grounds. You nod an apology to them. In return, they peck your sandal. And then there's the host. He emerges like a triumphant general returning from campaign, wearing a robe that once belonged to his grandfather, and with only minor wine stains. He clasps your hand with enthusiasm, declares it the best gathering of the season, and starts reciting lines of Horace with that sleep-deprived passion only wealthy patrons can manage at sunrise. Nunc est bibendum, he crows. Now is the time for drinking, you mutter in return, not entirely ironically. He begins describing the events of the night as though they were legends of war. Did you see how Rufus tried to debate the priestess of Isis about metaphysics, then passed out in the Venus fountain? Glorious. You nod, helpfully. You had, in fact, helped fish Rufus out. The host hands you a small pouch, payment. But also more than that, it's gratitude. In this pouch is your future job security, your reputation, and the acknowledgement that without you, this orgy would have been just another toga tantrum with fig stains. And what a pouch it is. There's the agreed-upon denarii, but also a small carved charm from Egypt, a voucher for a wine amphora from Gaul, and, oddly, a handwritten note that simply says, "Favor owed, Gaius 5. You tuck it into your belt. In Rome, favors are the real currency. You step outside into the chill dawn, where the sky has turned that clear, pale Roman blue. The streets are quiet, just a few early traders wheeling carts of produce, and one group of Vestal virgins gliding silently toward the Forum. You watch them pass, their pure white robes fluttering in contrast to your now thoroughly grape-scented tunic. Time to visit the bathhouse. This is tradition. After every major event, you head straight for the thermi. Not just to wash, though you could use it, but to catch up on the latest gossip. Information flows more freely in steam than in Senate scrolls. The bathhouse you prefer is one of the newer ones, built under the patronage of a former gladiator turned real estate magnate. It's sleek, warm, and staffed by attendants who know never to ask questions. You nod to the doorman, tip the towel boy, and step inside. First, the apoditerium, the changing room. You peel off your toga, which now smells like citrus, rosemary, and poor decisions. You store it in a cubby, tie on a linen wrap, and head into the tepidarium. The warm air hugs your skin like a gentle embrace, and you can already feel your muscles begin to soften. You pass a pair of senators in whispered conversation, one gesturing animatedly with a bath ladle. They're plotting a marriage alliance, or maybe a property swap. Hard to tell. You recognize one of them from last night. He sees you, gives a subtle nod, and says to his companion, "That's the one who made it all happen." You pretend not to hear, but your step gets a bit lighter. Then into the caldarium, the hot room, thick with steam and sweat. You sit on a stone bench and let the heat melt the memory of spilled wine and shrieking parrots. A fellow planner is already here, one you know from the games committee. He raises an eyebrow and murmurs, "Heard you had a leopard this time." You smile, lean back and say, "It didn't bite anyone important." Steam laughs are the best kind. Half breath, half disbelief. Later, you'll finish with a cold plunge in the frigidarium, shocking your senses back into alertness. But for now, you let yourself fade into the steam. The bathhouse chatter continues around you, stories half true, rumors already growing fangs. One guest apparently proposed marriage to a statue. Another tried to hire the poet to write an epic about his dog. It's all wildly exaggerated, of course, except for the dog part. That actually happened. Historians still argue whether these bathhouses were truly democratic spaces or subtly stratified along social lines. All you know is here, in the haze of eucalyptus and echoes, nobody cares what your name is, only what kind of night you pulled off. As you dry off and prepare to leave, the bath attendant hands you a note. "From the woman with the omens," he says. You open it. "Next time, less goat, more liars. You were brilliant." No signature, just a wax seal shaped like a crescent moon. You smile, tuck it into your pouch with the rest of your earned curiosities, and step back into the morning light. You're not just an orgy planner anymore. You're a legend of logistics. Mid-morning drapes itself lazily over Rome, gilding the rooftops with soft amber light. You shuffle homeward through streets slowly waking, past shopkeepers arranging olives, and laundry lines already busy with fluttering tunics. Your own tunic, wrinkled and still faintly perfumed with last night's chaos, feels like a story soaked into fabric. You reach your insula, a reasonably sturdy third-floor apartment with a balcony view of a fig vendor and, on lucky days, a clear angle on the Pantheon's dome. You don't live like a senator, but you don't have to. You live like someone who sees senators make fools of themselves. And that's something. Inside, you collapse face first onto a linen-stuffed mattress. The linen smells of crushed lavender and whatever herbs your house servant tried to use to calm your spirit. You're too tired to be calmed. You drift off almost instantly, dreaming of peacocks playing dice with laurel crowns. When you wake, it's afternoon, and your stomach sounds like a disgruntled legionnaire. You toss on a fresh tunic, this one unrumpled for now, and head out for something solid. Bread, cheese, olives, maybe a slice of fig pie if the bakery hasn't sold out. At the corner stall, the baker gives you a knowing nod and says, "Heard about the marble statue in the fountain." Word travels faster than reason in Rome. You pay for your food and move on, chewing thoughtfully as you wander. The city has taken on a quieter rhythm. Merchants bartering, children chasing each other around pillars, and that one old man who's always feeding pigeons and mumbling about how everything was better under Augustus. You pass him, he waves vaguely, and you both understand the eternal complaint of aging empires. Eventually, you find yourself drifting toward the Temple of Venus, more out of habit than devotion. You sit on the steps, munching olives, and watch a pair of acrobats rehearse flips in the plaza. It's peaceful, briefly. Because just as you're considering whether to doze again or buy wine, a breathless slave boy appears, wide-eyed and clutching a scroll. He hands it over and bolts. You unroll it. Another invitation, another orgy. This one's from an up-and-coming patrician who's trying to one-up his rivals. His note is florid, peppered with phrases like, "an affair to transcend the mortal plane," and "I shall require 17 Egyptian dancers and a live phoenix." You roll your eyes. Then you check the date. 3 days from now. You sigh, finish your olives, and start walking. There's work to do. First stop, the exotic animal broker near the Aventine Hill. His place is hard to miss. Less a storefront, more a controlled circus of cages and suspicious noises. You're greeted by the smell of wet hay, parrot screeches, and something you hope isn't a bear with indigestion. Back again, the broker croaks from his perch on a stool shaped like a turtle. I need something impressive, you say, but not deadly, preferably winged, and good with crowds. He scratches his chin. How do you feel about flamingos? You blink. Pink, exotic, mildly temperamental, and they strut. You consider this. Flamingos aren't Roman, per se, but neither are most of the dishes served at these events. Besides, a strutting bird with questionable manners might be just the right level of novelty. I'll take 2, maybe 3. He grins, scribbles something on a tablet, and adds, no refunds if they stab anyone with their beaks. Noted. Next stop, musicians. You head to the musicians' square, where hopeful performers cluster like grapes on a vine, each hoping to be plucked for their next gig. You test out a few groups, some too sleepy, others too experimental. Eventually, you settle on a trio of sisters who sing in haunting harmony and can also play the aulos, lyre, and an instrument that might be a hybrid between a tambourine and a sieve. They're perfect. They ask what kind of party it is. You hesitate. It's philosophical. They nod slowly. One says, we've done those. Fewer fights, more crying. You hire them on the spot. Then you stop by the perfumers. You need the place to smell like roses and myrrh, not panic and panic-induced sweat. The shopkeeper is eager to impress, offering you a new blend called Whispers of Apollo. You sniff. It's not terrible. In fact, it smells like someone tried to bottle desire and self-doubt. Perfect. At home that evening, you lay out your plans on a wax tablet. Logistics, guest list, contingency maps. You sketch out furniture placement and a diagram for how to keep flamingos from escaping into the kitchen. This part isn't glamorous, but it's what keeps everything from turning into a disaster epic. And as you're scribbling, the candle flickers, casting wild shadows on the wall. Your eyes sting with exhaustion, but you know you won't sleep. Not just yet. Because this isn't just another event. This is a duel of egos, a social showdown, and your client. He doesn't want a party. He wants a myth. Historians still argue whether these elaborate gatherings were sincere spiritual experiences, decadent madness, or elaborate status plays. But as you map out the route for the dancers, avoiding the fountain this time, you know the truth is simpler. They were all 3, in layers, like you, part entertainer, part engineer, part silent witness to Rome's slow implosion. One opulent evening at a time, you douse the candle, stretch, pour a small cup of wine. Tomorrow, you hire fire jugglers. Tonight, you listen to the faint sounds of the city curling inward to sleep. Dogs barking, water trickling, someone somewhere singing softly in Greek. You close your eyes and picture flamingos. The morning sun has a way of slapping you awake in Rome. Not gently, not with warmth, but with the accusatory glare of a god who knows how little sleep you got. You roll from your mattress and groan at the echo of wine and worry still humming behind your eyes. Today is supply day. You tie your sandals like a soldier preparing for battle, grab your satchel, and descend the creaky stairs of your apartment. The hallway smells faintly of boiled cabbage and disappointment. Down below, your regular mule cart awaits, driven by a man who's never once smiled. even when paid in advance. First stop, fabric. Your client's brief includes billowing silks that remind one of cloud chariots. Vague. You arrive at a weaver's market stall near the Tiber, where bolts of cloth hang like banners in a victory parade. The merchant, always trying to upsell, waves a length of purple-dyed silk under your nose. This, he says, was inspired by Cleopatra's sails. Does it come with her navy? You deadpan. He doesn't laugh, but he does offer a discount when you threaten to walk. You buy several lengths of it, plus gauzy white panels for drapery and stage dressing. You'll need them to soften the marble surfaces and hide whatever's underneath that shouldn't be seen, like the plumbing. Next, you head to the prop maker. This particular artisan is a wizard with wood and bronze, able to craft anything from a mock trident to a fully collapsible Pegasus. You explain your vision, a ceremonial chariot that can be wheeled in during the dessert course, bearing grapes, naked poetry, and ideally not one accident-prone flamingo. He sketches quickly, murmuring to himself. We'll reinforce the wheels, add gold leaf, maybe a torch mount. Make sure it can turn corners, you say, and fit through a standard doorway. Ah, he sighs. You want magic and logic. Exactly. He nods. That'll cost extra. You pay it. By midday, you're back near the Forum, where the city's pulse beats loudest. There's a public trial unfolding. Some senator accused of bribing a temple priest to consecrate his pet monkey. You watch for a moment. The monkey is, in fact, present, wearing a miniature toga. Historians still argue whether this trial was satirical or deadly earnest. Rome doesn't always clarify. Your stomach reminds you it hasn't seen bread in hours. You find a nearby tavern and order pulls, a thick porridge, and a hard-boiled egg with herbs. It's not fancy, but it grounds you. You overhear snippets of conversation from the next table. Someone's lost their villa to dice. Someone else saw a centurion dance naked in last week's Saturnalia. All normal. As you eat, you run over the checklist in your mind. Flamingos. Secured, probably. Musicians. Rehearsing a version of Bacchus Has No Bedtime. Fabrics. Arriving tomorrow. Prop chariot. Under construction. Pending torch mounts. But something's missing. The menu. You head to the Thermopolium district, where food vendors sharpen knives and roast meats for the midday rush. You consult with your usual caterer, a retired gladiator turned chef who once fed the Vestal virgins and now makes truffle-laced garum like it's a calling. You lay out the request. Themed dishes, symbolic pairings, one course involving edible flowers, another involving stuffed dormice. He nods sagely and suggests adding honeyed locusts for texture. You make a face. He shrugs. They're seasonal. The menu begins to take shape. Oysters to open appetites, lamb with cumin and coriander, baked pears and wine reduction, fig cakes, and a finale featuring flaming dessert served from a dish shaped like Jupiter's thunderbolt. It's ambitious, possibly excessive, but your client's ambition demands excess. On your way home, you detour past the Forum Boreum, the cattle market. There's a statue here of Hercules slaying Cacus, and you pause to stare at it for a moment. Tourists gaze in awe. You, meanwhile, wonder if Hercules ever had to coordinate a seating chart for 60 drunken elites without sparking a political scandal. Probably not. Back at your apartment, you open the windows and let in the breeze. It carries scents of citrus and brick dust, of sweat and olives, of a city endlessly living and forgetting. You sit down and begin sketching a floor plan. How guests will enter, where servers will circulate, how to position the musicians so they aren't drowned out by laughter or a mid-feast poetry duel. The details matter. You remember the time a poorly placed harpist was knocked into a wine fountain by an over-eager guest reenacting the Iliad. You can't afford that again. As the sun dips lower, your mind drifts to tomorrow's task, briefing the dancers. They'll need space to rehearse, costuming, lighting cues, and someone on hand in case a peacock wanders into their formation again. You briefly consider adding a "no livestock on stage" clause to your contracts. Your work stretches into dusk. You light a small oil lamp and scratch out a new list on your wax tablet. Emergency protocols, backup wine barrels, extra laurel wreaths. You'll need a fast courier to summon replacements if anything goes sideways, and something always goes sideways. Your final note reads simply, "Prepare for chaos. Smile anyway." You lean back, eyes closing for just a moment, and listen. Rome doesn't sleep early. There's laughter below, a burst of song, someone shouting about philosophy near the corner bathhouse. And through it all, you sit in your apartment, surrounded by swatches, scrolls, and the faint aroma of rose oil, building a masterpiece no one will remember properly, but everyone will brag about attending. In this city, memory is a performance too. And you're the stagehand of legend. By morning, you've barely slept. Again, there's always something. A dream about an overcooked boar stuffed with scrolls. A creaking cart below your window that sounds like it's delivering curses instead of olives. You stretch, yawn, and accept the inevitable. The dancers await. You trek across the city to the Ludus, the training ground where acrobats, performers, and interpretive pantomime artists rehearse for temple festivals, triumphs, and, yes, orgies. The place smells of sandalwood oil, sweat, and ambition. A dozen dancers are already warming up in the courtyard, bending into impossible shapes with alarming nonchalance. You clap twice. They stop, slowly, deliberately, like cats acknowledging your presence, but unsure if you're worth it. "All right," you say, rolling out a parchment. "You'll be performing during the fourth course. Think, Bacchus arriving at Mount Olympus, but make it flirtier. There's silk drapery, live musicians, and a chariot, which may or may not be fireproof. One dancer raises a hand. Will there be grapes? There will be so many grapes, you assure him. You demonstrate the space using string and chalk. Here's where the chariot rolls in. Here's the column you should not slam into. Here's where the musicians will sit, assuming they haven't started drinking early. They probably will. You ask if anyone is allergic to peacock feathers. 2 hands go up. Noted. A few of the dancers rehearse the wine pour cascade, a synchronized move involving amphorae, hip rolls, and a surprising amount of coordination. One slip, and someone's costume will never forgive them. You silently pray to Venus for balance and choreography. Midway through rehearsal, a runner brings news. The client wants to include a live reading from Ovid's Ars Amatoria. Of course he does. The poem is famous, borderline scandalous, and notoriously long. You'll need to abridge it or risk a revolt from bored senators and overstimulated debutantes. You assign the task to a local rhetorician/actor who always has dramatic eyeliner and an opinion about everything. Make it poetic but digestible, you instruct. We're aiming for titillating, not tedious. He smirks. I'll add dramatic pauses. You sigh. Not too many. Back at your headquarters, an actual room, now overrun by silks, wine amphorae, and a papier-mâché dolphin you forgot about. You update the master scroll. You're interrupted by a courier from the kitchen. The chef wants to test the flaming dessert. You rush to the thermopolium before he accidentally torches his eyebrows. You arrive to find a small crowd watching as the chef, wearing what might be a ceremonial apron, pours honey and spiced wine over a fig-stuffed pastry. He lights it. The flame whooshes upward with the drama of Vesuvius in a bad mood. The onlookers applaud. "Don't worry," he says, brushing ash from his beard. "I'll use less cinnamon on the night." You're not reassured. You taste it. Warm, crunchy, sweet, slightly scorched. Perfect. You lie. With dessert tested and dancers pirouetting into place, you turn your attention to logistics. You need 10 extra torches. Someone stole 3 last time. 2 backup musicians, in case the lyre player runs off with a guest again. Extra perfume to mask the smell of melting wax and sweaty ambition. You also send a message to the local aqueduct maintenance office. At the last gathering, a clogged fountain created an impromptu foot bath. Elegant, perhaps. Sanitary? Not so much. Later that day, you stop by the venue. A grand domus perched on the Aventine Hill, its entryway flanked by statues of Mars and Venus in conversation, or conflict, depending on your interpretation. The atrium gleams. Slaves polish marble floors until they can see their own exhausted reflections. You map out each room again: the greeting area, the dining triclinium, the courtyard, where peacocks will strut and the chariot will stage its entrance. There's a problem with the back corridor. It's too narrow for efficient wine delivery. You summon the steward. "Can we use the servants' hall instead?" He hesitates. "It smells of salted fish." "Perfect. No one will linger." You send word to the torchbearers. Keep the flame low, the mood high. You instruct the musicians to rehearse slower tempos for after dinner. You remind the perfume team to layer citrus first, then rose. You don't want the room to smell like a merchant's daughter with something to prove. On your way out, you catch sight of the client's family crest etched into the marble threshold. A lion devouring a goat while standing on a ship. You have no idea what it means, but it looks expensive. The sun is setting now, and you take the long route home past the Circus Maximus, where chariots once raced in front of 150,000 roaring fans. A street poet performs an ode to garlic. A child steals a fig and laughs as the vendor chases her. The city lives in layers. Opulence on top, madness underneath. Back at your apartment, you collapse into a chair and kick off your sandals. One more day until the big event. You run through everything in your mind. Again. Seating chart, finalized wine barrels, tripled the order, backup peacocks, caged and preened, crisis plan, includes don't cry in front of clients. As you close your eyes, your mind replays the dancers, the flaming dessert, the echo of sandals on marble, and the faintest whisper of laughter from parties past. You're close now. The plan is set. All that remains is to hope no one brings a monkey this time. The sun rises slow and syrupy over Rome, painting the rooftops in burnt orange. You're up before it, barely dressed, half-conscious, clutching your event checklist like it's a sacred scroll. Today is the day. The orgy, well, celebration, is hours away, and everything must tick like a water clock at full tilt. You begin with a brisk inspection of the venue. The domus is a flurry of activity. Slaves scrub mosaics with vinegar water, polish bronze fixtures until they shine like Helios's chariot wheels, and rearrange furniture under your increasingly specific direction. That couch is too close to the vomitorium. No one wants that association. You adjust the placement of the musicians for optimal acoustics. Test the flow of incense from discrete burners and light a torch to check for smoke trails. One curls upward like a question mark. Bad omen? Maybe. You relight it. Better. In the courtyard, the peacocks are preening themselves with divine smugness. You give them a look. Just behave this time. Your assistants are already running frantic. One forgot where they put the guest list scroll. Another is panicking about the lack of figs for the pre-dinner amuse-bouche. There are always more figs. You say flatly. Always. The chef bursts in, waving a ladle. Someone's allergic to pine nuts. You nod. Replace them with pomegranate seeds. Pretend it's symbolic. Of what? Of restraint. Irony. Who cares? Make it work. By mid-morning, the first of the staff musicians arrives. A bald man with a golden nose ring and a stringed instrument that looks older than the Republic itself. He plucks a few notes. Melancholy. Beautiful. Slightly out of tune. Play it slower tonight, you suggest. Make the guests feel like they're melting. He nods solemnly and begins tuning. A quick detour to the flower arrangements reveals another crisis. The garlands have wilted in the sun. You curse Venus under your breath, then recall an old trick. You dunk the blooms in cold water, wrap them in wet linen, and pray they'll revive before the elite arrive to sniff them with practiced indifference. By noon, your client arrives. He's wearing a sheer tunic, an olive branch circlet, and the expression of someone who hasn't worried about anything in 3 generations. It looks splendid, he says. You've outdone yourself. You force a smile and resist the urge to list all the things that might still go wrong. Shall we do a final walkthrough? You guide him through the layout, explaining the timing of each performance, where the servers will circulate, and how the lighting will shift from warm daylight to seductive twilight. He loves the detail, especially the dancers, especially the surprise dessert. Will it really be on fire? He whispers. Oh, yes, you whisper back. Later, you make the rounds again. The chariot is in place. Only one wheel squeaks, which you accept as a small miracle. The actors are rehearsing their Ovid monologue in low, syrupy tones. The harpist has braided her hair with violets. You slip a few coins to the torchbearers with a warning. If your hair catches fire, just keep walking, dramatically. The perfumers arrive next, trailing scents of jasmine, orange blossom, and faint desperation. You direct them to spritz the entrances, the couches, and the drapes, but not the food. Last time, someone thought the honeyed dormice tasted like soap. As twilight falls, the first guests begin to arrive. Senators in embroidered stolas, courtesans glistening with oil and malice, poets wearing more gold than sense. You welcome each with a smile and a veiled compliment. Ah, Lucius, I see you've brought your famous appetite. Julia, that bracelet is almost as radiant as your scandals. They laugh, preen, and glide into the atrium like celestial beings ready to descend into decadence. The first course begins. Simple fare, intentionally rustic. Flatbreads with garum dips, olives soaked in wine, cheese wrapped in fig leaves. The guests chatter, sip, and loosen. Servers weave through the crowd like dancers themselves, pouring sweet wine, offering chilled fruit. In the corner, the musicians strike a low, steady rhythm. The room responds. Shoulders relax, eyes half close. The orgy hasn't started, of course not, but the senses are already dizzy. You drift behind a curtain, take a sip of diluted wine, and exhale. So far, so good. That's when the astrologer arrives. You'd forgotten he was on the program, added late at the host's insistence. He's tall, draped in midnight blue robes embroidered with silver stars, and carries a chart the size of a bedsheet. "Where shall I lecture?" he asks. You blink. Somewhere people can ignore you without guilt. You settle him near the fountain, flanked by lanterns and a few curious guests. He unrolls the chart and begins proclaiming things about Venus being in opposition to Mars. You leave him mid-sentence. Dinner continues. More courses arrive. Flaming Vesuvius and lubricated poetry. "Perfect," he says, elbowing his way in. You let it go. By now, the party has achieved escape velocity. It no longer needs your every breath. It's humming on its own frequency. You circulate one last time, nodding at guests mid-gossip, straightening a drooping vine here, a tipped amphora there. One man appears to be whispering sweet nothings to a bust of Cicero. You choose not to intervene. And then you slip away again, this time to a small side chamber you've claimed as a planning nook. There's an amphora of chilled wine waiting, along with a low bench and a folded blanket you never quite use. You sit. For the first time in 12 hours, you sit. Through the gauzy curtains, you can still hear the pulse of the night. Laughter, harp strings, the clink of glass. Somewhere, someone is attempting to juggle figs and failing. You smile to yourself. It worked. All of it. You've brought a touch of Olympus down to the palatial back streets of Rome, wrapped in velvet and lit by flame. You raise your goblet and salute. Quiet, invisible, and entirely triumphant. And then you sip. Slowly. Because tomorrow, it begins again. The first rays of dawn filter through the curtains, soft and forgiving, after a night so wild it almost feels like a dream, or a slightly embarrassing fever. You wake with the faint scent of rose water and burnt oil still lingering in the air, your head heavy, but your mind already ticking ahead. Today is the day after, the aftermath, the cleanup, the reckoning, the patching together of what remains. You drag yourself upright, muscles protesting after hours of frantic movement and barely disguised panic. You trudge through the labyrinth of the domus, greeted by a scene that looks suspiciously like the ruins of Pompeii after a particularly messy eruption. Cups are strewn about like evidence of a forgotten crime scene. Drapes hang crookedly, stained with spilled wine. A scattering of figs and nuts litter the marble floors. One unfortunate slave glares at a broken amphora, muttering curses in Greek under his breath. You start the inventory. How many goblets are shattered? Which slaves are missing? Did anyone actually get arrested? No official record of that, thankfully. Your first stop is the kitchen, where the exhausted cooks are rinsing out pots with barely concealed glee. One mutters, "Never again," in a voice so bitter you almost believe it. Meanwhile, the musicians are packing up their ancient instruments, tuning pegs loose and strings frayed. The harpist's braid is undone, petals caught in her hair like tiny fragrant scars. You offer a tired smile, and she returns it with a weary bow. You wander outside, stepping carefully over crushed grape skins and trampled ivy. The peacocks are already resuming their routine, strutting through the garden with the same haughty air as if nothing had happened. You spot one near the fountain, picking at something shiny. It's a gold earring. You pocket it, deciding it might be a suitable bribe for the evening staff, if you can get it cleaned. As the day wears on, you organize a team to deal with the furniture and mosaics. We can't have the host's atrium looking like a circus tent after the parade, you remind them, more stern than you feel. Historians still argue whether Roman cleanup crews worked immediately after such festivities or allowed a day of rest, but you know better. The city moves too fast to waste time. You're halfway through ordering slaves to sweep and scrub when your client arrives, surprisingly chipper. "What a night," he says, patting you on the back with an enthusiasm that makes your ribs ache. He surveys the scene and laughs. "You planned this chaos perfectly." You nod wearily. "I aim to please." Later, you check the guest list for any glaring omissions or offenses. Thankfully, no senators sent angry letters about stolen togas or lost rings, though there are a few whispered rumors about a senator caught napping in a bathhouse. You try not to dwell on that. In the afternoon, word arrives that the city guard turned a blind eye to some late-night mischief near the forum. A relief. You breathe a little easier. As the sun sets again, you're already making notes for the next event. Because, of course, there will be a next event. The cycle continues, whether you like it or not. You jot down ideas for new exotic foods, perhaps some fresh entertainers from distant provinces. Maybe this time, fewer flaming desserts. Maybe. For now, you lean back, rub your aching eyes, and remember the faint thrill of that night. The delicate balance between order and abandon. The illusion of control in the face of unrestrained revelry. And you think, with a half smile, that maybe you're a little mad. But then, so is Rome. The city hums with a different rhythm now. The day after the night of revelry, but life doesn't pause. You find yourself wandering the streets of Rome, notebook in hand, observing the aftershocks of your handiwork. The alleyways still smell faintly of spilt wine and crushed roses, and a few bleary-eyed citizens squint suspiciously at you, probably wondering if you're some sort of mysterious priestess of debauchery. You duck into a bustling market, where vendors shout about fresh figs and olives, the clamor of the day, a sharp contrast to last night's languid murmurs. You watch a butcher skillfully carve cuts of wild boar, wondering if that would be an acceptable dish for your next event, or too savage for the refined palates of the guests. Nearby, a philosopher debates loudly with a rhetorician over the virtues of Stoicism versus Epicureanism, and you pause to eavesdrop. Historians still argue whether such debates were the genuine intellectual pastime of the day, or just elaborate performances designed to impress wealthy patrons. You jot a few notes. Add a philosopher's corner next event. Potentially messy, but fascinating. There's something intoxicating about this mix of high culture and low revelry, like Rome itself, layered in contradiction. Walking further, you encounter a street performer juggling flaming torches while balancing on a barrel. The crowd cheers, and you can't help but admire the daring, though you hope no one tries to replicate this at your carefully curated soirees. A child nearby waves at you, clutching a miniature laurel wreath. You smile and tip your imaginary hat. Rome is alive with stories, some told, some whispered, some caught in the shadows. Back at the Domus, you review the guest list and feedback. Compliments mix with subtle complaints. Too much wine here, not enough music there. A senator apparently complained about the lack of privacy in the lounging alcoves, though you suspect he just wanted to escape his wife's matchmaking schemes. You consider experimenting with seating arrangements, perhaps adding more private nooks or introducing a discreet signal system to warn of approaching dignitaries. Later, as dusk settles, you convene with your core team. The musicians, the cooks, the household slaves, all vital cogs in the well-oiled machine of the Roman orgy planner's world. Together, You brainstorm themes for the upcoming festivities. Exotic spices, rare wines, elaborate costumes, possibly a water feature or two. The astrologer chimes in with a reminder about an upcoming eclipse, suggesting it might add a mystical touch to the next event. You file that under ambitious but intriguing. You sip a cup of spiced wine, feeling the warm buzz spread through your chest. The city is unpredictable, chaotic, and sometimes exhausting. But it's also endlessly fascinating. As night falls once more, you step out onto the balcony overlooking the forum. The moon casts a silver glow over marble columns and bustling streets. Somewhere below, a group of poets recites verses by torchlight, their voices rising and falling like waves. You breathe in deeply, the cool night air mingling with faint traces of incense, and you realize this is your life now, a dance between order and excess, tradition and innovation, reality and fantasy. You are not just a planner of parties. You are the orchestrator of moments that linger long after the guests have gone home. Fragments of joy, secrets whispered beneath the stars, memories woven into the fabric of Rome itself. And tomorrow, the city will beckon you again. The morning breaks soft and golden, filtering through the olive trees that frame the villa's garden. You're already awake, tracing the slow arc of the sun across the sky as you prepare for the final steps before the next grand affair. This is the unseen work. The negotiation with merchants, the delicate diplomacy with aristocratic families, the subtle art of reading rumors and politics that swirl just beneath the surface. You meet with a spice trader from Alexandria, whose wares promise flavors as exotic as they are expensive: saffron, myrrh, and a rare fermented fish sauce that you suspect only a few palates can tolerate. He offers you a sample with a knowing smile, saying, "Roman tongues crave boldness." Historians still argue whether these imported luxuries were mere status symbols or truly transformed Roman cuisine, but you're less concerned with the debate than with how that hint of fire might elevate the next feast. Next, you convene with the household steward, a meticulous man who has the impossible task of balancing extravagance with the practical. He reminds you of the budget ceiling and the political sensitivities that could turn a lavish event into a scandal overnight. You listen, nodding, because every party you plan isn't just about pleasure, it's also about power. Rome's elite use these gatherings to weave alliances, spread gossip, and sometimes even settle scores. Discreetly, of course. Later, you walk through the atrium, already imagining how the light will play on the mosaics during the evening. You think about the music. Perhaps lyres mixed with a small chorus this time to create a richer texture that can shift from lively to intimate without losing the rhythm. The kitchen staff buzzes with quiet energy as they prepare the first ingredients, their hands deft and sure. You watch as one slave carefully slices pomegranates, the ruby seeds spilling like tiny jewels onto a marble platter. You remember that last night's flaming cake had been a hit and wonder how to top it. Maybe something with honeycomb, or a dessert shaped like a mythological creature? The trick, you remind yourself, is to surprise without overwhelming. As the afternoon wanes, you step outside to find a small group of artisans assembling decorations: garlands of laurel, ribbons dyed with indigo, and delicate glass vessels meant to catch candlelight, like stars caught in the breeze. You pause and inhale the mingled scents of lavender and crushed herbs, feeling a rare moment of calm. The city hums behind you, alive and unpredictable. But here in this space, you can almost hold time still. As evening approaches, the guests begin to arrive, robes flowing, laughter bubbling, the subtle clink of jewelry, and whispered greetings. You watch from the threshold, your heart steady despite the familiar flutter of anticipation. Tonight, like every night, is a dance between the eternal and the ephemeral, between the grand designs you craft and the spontaneous joys the guests bring, between order and abandon, control and chaos. You smile quietly. You were born for this. As the first notes of the lyre float through the air and candles flicker to life, you step back into the flow, ready to guide Rome's revelry once more. And as the night unfolds, you settle into your role, part conductor, part magician, part dreamweaver, knowing that while the city will never sleep, you've mastered the art of making it pause, just for a moment, in a perfect embrace of celebration. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The echoes of the night slowly fade, leaving only the soft hum of memory and the gentle warmth of the fading candles. You sink deeper into this quiet space, where the rush of voices and clinking cups become distant murmurs, like a lullaby sung by the city itself. The scent of jasmine and honey lingers faintly, comforting, as if the night has folded around you like a familiar blanket. There is no need to rush now, no need to chase the thrill or the next surprise. Instead, you breathe, slow and steady, feeling the steady beat of your own heart against the pulse of ancient Rome. The marble beneath your feet has cooled, the vines have settled, and even the stars seem to lean closer, whispering secrets of a world long past but never forgotten. Remember the laughter, the music, the delicate balance between revelry and rest, the moments when the impossible became real, if only for a night. Let that warmth cradle you as you drift gently toward sleep. The city will wait. Tomorrow, the dance will begin again. For now, rest in the quiet embrace of history's soft, endless night. End of script. Sweet dreams.